guys, it's Neil again from Heart of Texas Armory, and today I want to bring you guys a video review of this really cool dive watch from Seiko. So this is the Seiko STBR007, what I'm calling the Mini Tuna. So join me today and find out my complete thoughts on this really cool solar powered dive watch from Seiko. And taking a look at the specs here of the Mini Tuna, what'll probably stand out to you guys is just the overall dimensions here. So this watch certainly looks like a tuna. It has the tuna shroud. Everything looks legit like a regular tuna, but the dimensions here are quite a bit smaller. So case diameter under 43 millimeters here on this particular watch. Lug to lug distance from that point there to that point, 43 millimeters. So again, very small. Lug width here 20, so you can switch this out easily for other straps and bracelets and bands. And then also what's important, your case thickness here of only 11.5 millimeters. And like most other Seiko dive watches at this price point, we do have a hardlex crystal here, which can handle pretty much anything you'll throw at it, although it will scratch easier than sapphire crystal. We do have a 120 click unidirectional bezel, which feels like most other Seiko dive watches. Action's not terrible, it's decent, but it does feel a little bit spongy. If you're familiar with other Seiko dive watches, you're probably going to be familiar with how this will feel. We do have Seiko LumiBrite loom here, which is spectacular as you would expect. The loom here is some of the brightest I have in my collection, and it will last throughout the night, so very nice loom on this particular watch. And we do have a Seiko solar powered quartz movement here. That model number on that movement is a V147. Fairly accurate quartz movement here. Expect to get anywhere from plus or minus 10 to 15 seconds a month. So very solid quartz action here. And the bonus is it is solar powered, so you won't have to ever worry about changing out your battery. So one of the interesting things about this particular timepiece is that it is marketed as a ladies watch. So if you go to the Seiko Japan website, you'll see it right here. You'll see that these are labeled women's watch. So kind of interesting that Seiko did that. To me, the size here, although it certainly would work on a woman's wrist, it is perfectly fine for a man's as well. My wrist here is a 6 7/8 inch wrist, and it fits me just fine. And like most other Seiko dive watches, the dial here is well done. My particular model here has the black dial. You'll see it has minimal amount of text. It has the Seiko here at the 12 o'clock, and then down below it here you have the PADI logo, Solar, and Divers 200. We do have a date window here at the 4 o'clock, and I will point out that it does match the color here of the dial, which is nice, so it kind of blends in. It doesn't really stand out and be a big contrast. I like that. And I also like the fact that they put a little bit of loom to the right of that date window, so very nicely done on the date integration. Looking at the case here, being a Seiko Tuna watch here, you'll see it does have the tuna shroud here. This particular model uses a polymer shroud. I would prefer it to be a stainless steel shroud like you see on the Marine Master Tuna, but this one here, polymer, is just fine. It's there to protect the movement, protect the watch from falls and impacts. It's attached here by these 3 screws you can see right there. We also have a small crown here at the 4 o'clock position. You can get to it fairly easily, but I do feel that the crown is a bit small for the watch, but I do like it being in that 4 o'clock position there. That is a nice feature. Keeps that crown from digging into your wrist. The 120 click unidirectional bezel here has a aluminum insert with a loom pip right there. I do like the look of it. I like that it has the hour and minute markings throughout the entire track of that bezel. The action on it, as I mentioned earlier, is not great, but it's typical of what you'd see on most other Seiko dive watches. And taking a look at the hands here, they are well done and easy to read. Tons of loom have been applied to these hands, so they stand out really nice when in low light. Also like that the hands here, the minute hand and the seconds hand reaches pretty much all the way out to the chapter ring. That's always a nice touch. And I like the little loom pip here, the counterbalance on the seconds hand. And one final thing I'll mention, which is always nice on a quartz watch, is when the seconds hand lines up pretty much spot on with the chapter ring. So this particular watch is very consistent throughout the entire track, the seconds hand there, so well done on that. And taking a look at the case back here, you'll notice it is a nice polished screw down case back with the Seiko Tsunami logo right there in the middle. That's always nice to see. And it has all the relevant text you would need about the watch engraved into that case back. You'll probably also see right there that this is a limited edition, this particular model here, out of 2000, and my number is 1722 out of 2000. So some of the things I really like about this particular timepiece is just the overall dimensions, being the smallest out of all of the tuna watches, which is why I call this the Mini Tuna. You know, the baby tuna and the standard tunas are just too big for my wrist size, so this one here fits me a lot better than those. Also, I'm a big fan of the solar movement inside this timepiece. It is simple, it's accurate, it's rugged, it's reliable, and being solar powered, you never have to worry about changing the battery on it, so that's always a positive in my book. Another cool thing about this timepiece, being a Seiko dive watch, you know the lume is going to be spectacular. And this one is no different. The lume lasts throughout the night. Some of the best lume I've ever experienced on a dive watch. Seiko LumaBrite is simply top notch. I also like the fact that this is ISO certified. So this is a true dive watch. You can see it right there on the dial. Divers 200 meter. So when you get that certification, you just know this is going to be a great dive watch. You'd be able to take it scuba diving, of course snorkeling, or any other type of water activity. This watch will handle no problem. So let's talk about a few of the negatives with this watch that I found. Now, there's not a lot of negatives, but there are a few. The first one here is actually with that lug-to-lug distance. Now, typically I like to have my watches, my dive watches, with a lug-to-lug below 48 millimeters. But this one here with a 43 millimeter is almost a bit too short. It just wears kind of squat and square on the wrist. Maybe I'm just not used to it, but it just feels like it's just too short lug to lug. I think if they would have made these lugs just slightly longer, maybe a 45 millimeter, I might like it a little better. Not a huge negative there, and of course that is a subjective opinion, but I will mention it. And another negative I've discovered here from wearing this watch for the last 3 or 4 weeks is with the bezel. Now the bezel action is not terrible, it's not great, it's a bit spongy, and that is a slight negative there, typical of most other Seiko dive watches in this price point. But the problem is, it's a Seiko, so you know there's going to be some alignment issues, and this one's no different here. The bezel is slightly off, maybe just a half a degree to the left here. Not terrible, but I will mention that. And then the other thing here, this is a Seiko Tuna, so you do have that shroud here, and that limits you on how you're able to grab the bezel. So you're pretty much limited to using the bezel in this fashion here, and you just have that little bit of space here to grab onto that bezel, versus in most other watches, you're able to grab the bezel pretty much anywhere. But this one here, you're limited to that angle because of that shroud. But overall, this is a solid little dive watch here. I'm a big fan of the overall dimensions being quite a bit smaller than most of the other Seiko Tunas, so with my wrist size being under 7 inches, this one just suits me that much better. I'm a big fan of this solar quartz movement here. It's another reason why I picked up this watch in addition to the dimensions I mentioned earlier, but I just love that it's solar powered. You don't have to worry about changing the battery, and it's going to keep that charged for many months. So you could really set this watch down and come pick it up in 3 or 4 months down the road. It's still going to be ticking away, keeping great time. So I really like that about this timepiece. So with this timepiece here, I'm going to continue to evaluate it here over the next couple weeks and decide if I'm going to keep this watch in my collection or not. Overall, I'm a big fan of it. I do recommend it. It is a quality timepiece here. A lot of cool technology in this timepiece, but we'll see if I keep it in my collection or not. Guys, if you have any questions or comments on this particular watch, definitely leave them down below in the comment section, and I'll do my best to answer them. And I'll catch you in the next one. Y'all take care.